Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Making the Cut Series 2, Job Search During the COVID-19 Economy. I'm Ashwin Lokapalli, a postdoctoral associate. Here with me is Maha Haji, also a postdoctoral associate. It's our pleasure to be co-moderating this panel. We also have Yasmina Burek, a postdoctoral associate as well. She will be monitoring the Q&A window. Coming to some logistics and housekeeping rules. Here we have 5 panelists from different industrial backgrounds who were on the job market during the last economic crisis. They will introduce themselves in a moment. There was a huge interest in this panel and close to 200 people have registered. This webinar will be recorded and posted on the MIT PDA YouTube channel. Those who could not make it today and all the attendees will receive an email with the link to the recording. We will start by asking the panelists some questions, followed by a Q&A for the audience to ask questions. I request the audience to use the Q&A window to ask questions. You can also upvote a question to avoid repeating any questions relevant to you. The best question with the most votes will be prioritized, so you can start asking your questions now, and Yasmina will be monitoring them. We will try to accommodate as many questions as possible and hope the panelists can shed light and give some thoughtful insights to these questions. So without any further ado, it's our pleasure on behalf of MIT PDA to welcome our 5 panelists who made the cut during the last economic crisis. We thank each one of you for taking time out to do this panel. I would now like the panelists to introduce themselves by giving a little background. Name, when did you graduate, what department you were in, your current position. We will begin with the ladies first. Maybe Hinwa can start and pass on to Helen, then Sarah, and so on.
Hi, everybody. My name is Hinwa Schweiter. I graduated from MIT with a PhD in end of 2008. I studied in CSAIL, the Computer Science and AI Lab. And after I graduated, I worked at my first startup, which was doing speech recognition on mobile phones. And since then, I've been in startups. So this, right now I'm at Sense Labs, which does energy monitoring. And that's my 4th startup. And it's been a pretty cool adventure so far. That's it. Helen.
Hi everyone, so my name is Helen Chuang. I also got my PhD in 2008. Actually, an interesting tidbit is that I started my first job before I got my PhD. So I was writing out my thesis and doing my first job at the same time. And my first 2 jobs were startups in biotech. And I forgot to say I got my PhD in chemical engineering. And my thesis was in the biotechnology area. So that's why I went into startups in biotech sector. And that's kind of where I thought my career was going to be, except because of the general recession and startups not doing well, I eventually ended up in the aerospace industry. So now I work at the Northrop Grumman Corporation, which is not a startup at all. It's a huge multinational company. And I'm a manager in systems engineering there. That's it. Next is Sarah.
Sarah might be frozen.
Oh.
Hello, Sarah. Are you there? She is frozen.
I think, yeah, she might be frozen. So we can go on to David and come back to Sarah.
Hey everybody, my name is David Nguyen. I graduated from MIT in 2008 from course 9, so that's Brain and Cognitive Sciences. After that, I went to join the NIH for my postdoc. And then after 3 years in my postdoc, I joined industry. So I first went to Pfizer, and then from Pfizer, I went to Sage Therapeutics, which is a biotech company. And there I lead my own group in quantitative systems pharmacology. So it's a modeling and simulations group. Thanks.
Sarah, you can carry on, or go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I'm having a bit of technical difficulties. Hi, I'm Sarah Slad. I also finished my PhD in 2008. I was course 17, political science, where I did an emphasis on quantitative methods. My first job out of my PhD in 2008 was at the Gallup poll, where I did a mix of writing and analyzing survey data, and then doing business consulting. After that, I worked at Netflix in consumer insights research, and then I've been at Facebook for the last 8 years. I'm a director of research focusing on advertising and business products.
Should I go?
Yeah, last we have you, Georgios.
Hi, this is Yorgos. I finished my PhD in February 2009. Also CSAIL, my advisor was actually course 9, but it was machine learning. I've been doing startups since my master's in 99. Joined Kayak actually a little bit before finishing the PhD, and I've been there since. Now I'm president of Kayak, responsible overall for the travel side of the business.
Okay, so let's go to some numbers from the last economic crisis and compare it with the present crisis. During the 2008 and 9 crisis, 8.8 million jobs were lost, and unemployment spiked to close to 10% by October 2009, and 8 million homes were foreclosures. $19.2 trillion in household wealth was evaporated, and share market declined to around negative 49% in 2008. $7.4 trillion in stock wealth was lost, which accommodated for $66,000 per household on average. In the present crisis, 60 million jobs or people have applied for unemployment benefits so far, and a recent publication from Becker-Friedman Institute at the University of Chicago estimated that 42% of these jobs or layoffs in the US will be permanent. Unemployment rate was at its peak in July this year, close to 15%, which was an increase of approximately 12% since Jan 2020. Officially, the current unemployment rate is at 10%, which is close to what we had, or which is almost the same what we had in the 2008-9 crisis. And share market crashed to minus or negative 28% in mid-March. So the first question is for all the panelists, based on the data and your experience in searching for industrial jobs during the last economic crisis, what were the challenges you faced, and what advice can you provide the PhDs and postdocs seeking jobs during the current economic crisis due to pandemic? Please go ahead in the reverse order of your introduction to answer.
I think this crisis is much worse, especially in sectors like travel, where I am. But I think the MIT Association is an enormous credibility. None of the recent graduates or postdocs have any problem pursuing the job that they like. I think finding an interesting job requires 3 components. The one is credibility, you instantly have it. The second one is convincing, coming out of an academic background, convincing that you have the business and entrepreneurial acumen that is appropriate for the company you are talking to, if it's an industry job. And the last one is convincing that you are a good cultural fit. So my advice there is find companies where you know classmates or former colleagues that are very happy. If they're happy, it means the employer is also so happy with them. So there's no better introduction than a former colleague.
Yeah, I was going to share some similar advice, which is one, to use the amazing network that you have of colleagues from MIT. Oftentimes, especially in Silicon Valley, a referral is one of the best ways to get a foot in the door at a company, for the same reasons that you just mentioned, about like having, if there are colleagues that you have who come from similar backgrounds, the employer already is kind of familiar with that background. I will say a kind of an anecdote that from my experience in 2008, I feel like as MIT, we have a wonderful reputation for our academic capabilities. We don't always have the same reputation for our interpersonal skills. And so I distinctly remember being on a call with an Apple recruiter who had looked over my resume and said to me at the end of the call, said, "Oh, I just had to talk to you in person first to make sure you could like actually communicate and we're fun to talk to." So, I mean, definitely think about also, you know, sharing. We like to really see at Facebook the kind of like human side of people. So, you know, being prepared to talk about kind of interests outside of your work. Also being really, you know, I think something that we see with applicants during times like this is that people apply to a really broad range of jobs. And I actually should suggest you do the opposite and really focus on finding roles that your skills and background are a really good fit for, or that if you have a great interest in an area or company, that you can really clearly articulate why you have an interest and passion for that space and company. Companies tend to be wary of kind of the shotgun method of I'm just going to apply to 500 roles at a company or to 500 different companies, and they can tell when there isn't that passion there. So really tap into what, you know, you're excited about and share that with the company.
I guess I'll go next, but you know, Artie's really great advice. I think I'll try to complement that and just share a bit of my story. So after I graduated my PhD, I went on to my postdoc. So I tried to pursue the academic route. And, you know, Ashwin gave some stats. The other part of that was that there was a lot of funding that was cut for labs and, you know, NIH. So just the number of like postdocs transitioning into academic faculty was dramatically reduced, you know, in around the 2008 time. So I actually cut my postdoc short. And there was two reasons. One was, you know, there were my friends who were doing like 2 postdocs. It was really like rolling the dice whether or not you land a faculty position. But then we also were expecting a baby. So, you know, I was like, all right, what am I gonna do now? Because, you know, it's like, get like a better income or continue doing this, you know? And so I started applying to industry jobs, and I found it actually very challenging to make that transition from academia to industry. The network really helped. And it was trying to find the right pharmaceutical companies, the right industries that where I felt like I could make a contribution and make that case. And it's something that Sarah mentioned. But eventually, when I landed the job at Pfizer, it was actually specifically my friend taking my resume and actually carrying it over to the hiring manager's desk and like putting it on his desk. So it's really true. Make use of your network. It like matters so much for me. And the other thing I would say is that just to compliment what was said was that recruiters are like your best friend. So if you go to my LinkedIn page, you'll see that I'm linked in with a lot of recruiters. And what I do there is I think it's a mutual kind of relationship. Like they want to get to know you. So schedule meetings with them, like 30-minute sessions, and explain to the recruiter who you are, what you're looking for. And what they'll do is they basically make their living off of connecting you with jobs. So they will be actively looking for you, you know, positions basically throughout your career. So keep an open mind there, keep those connections open. And, you know, I always answer those calls. So when they say, hey, I have a position for you, I'll say, yeah, let's talk about it. And if it's not right for me, I'll just say, hey, politely, you know, it's not the right thing, but let's keep the lines open. So thanks.
So I'll go next. And actually, I will emphasize 2 points that were already made. One is the networking, and the other is enthusiasm. Among the 3 jobs I've gotten, 2 of them are from networking. And I've definitely tried a lot more of the cold call approach of submitting resume to a website. And I would say the success rate of that is very low. The first job I got is because of a professor I knew at Caltech. And the job I have now is because I went to a networking event where I ran into the vice president of the company. So I would say definitely, yeah, with your success of getting a job is a lot higher when you get to a person that you talk to who can speak for you. So that definitely, I think that's a point that's kind of echoed across the board. And I'm also currently a hiring manager at my company, and I would say enthusiasm does count for a lot. Obviously, how much you qualify and your capability is the number one factor for hiring someone. But next to that, how much enthusiasm you express, both towards a specific position and also just how much enthusiasm you seem to have for life in general. That counts a lot too during an interview. That's it.
Yeah, so of course I agree with almost everything said so far. To add my own experience, when I graduated and started looking, I have to admit, like, I don't think I realized the country was in a recession, and or maybe I did, but didn't quite register. And I had always thought I didn't want to teach. I knew I wanted to be in the industry, and I always assumed I would be in a big sort of big corporation, sort of stable. I don't know if there are other people of my own background here, but as a Lebanese, you know, you're raised to in a certain way, like, okay, you need a stable job, nothing too risky. And so that was what I had in mind. And I applied to some of the big companies, and I got a bunch of rejections. And at least I took it kind of personally. You know, you're at MIT, you work so hard, you try to be the best at everything, and so it does, the rejections, the first ones are pretty hard. Try not to take them too personally. It's really it really depends on the situation. And so eventually I ended up, through my advisor, connecting to my first startup, which ended up being eye-opening. And I remember it was suggested to me at the beginning, and I was like, no, I need something much less riskier than this. And I shelved it, and I didn't follow up, but which wasn't the best idea. So afterwards, after getting all the rejections, I then went back and through my advisor connected with them. And it was a great thing. I've been, as I mentioned before, in startups since then. It's been a great adventure for me. In terms of advice, I'm just going to repeat it just to stress it. Network, meaningful connections. Use your time at MIT. Connect with even the connections with your colleague sitting next to you in a few years will be very valuable. Advisors, teachers from classes, try things that seem so simple, and you're like, well, how is that person going to help me? Just build your network slowly, and over time it will grow, and it'll help you the next time. But this time, start from school. There's no harm in that. And definitely for enthusiasm, I'm also a hiring manager, and there's nothing disappointing than getting a smart candidate that doesn't quite know what your company is about and what you do and why they're applying. So always research the company and show the right enthusiasm when you interview. That's it.
Great, thank you for all of those great suggestions and advice. The next question we have is for Helen. Helen, can you provide some advice for folks who may have lost jobs or job offers due to the COVID-19 recession? And afterward, other panelists, please feel free to chime in if you also have any experiences or advice.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, don't take it as a statement on your capability. I think either a rejection or a job loss can be extremely discouraging. I mean, I think no matter what you tell yourself, it's something you kind of have to cope with and live through. But I would say, the first thing is realize that, a lot of your job opportunity is driven in part by the market and by luck and timing to some extent. So don't be hard on yourself when you lose a job. I've definitely gone through the whole, like, am I still worthwhile to the society kind of thing? And don't go through that if you can. And I would say instead of rushing into the next job, and if your economics allow, give yourself the time to research for the right next opportunity. Because sometimes what we do as a consequence of feeling rejected is jumping to the next job right away, just so we feel like we're a useful person. But if your time allows, I would definitely say let yourself search a broader spectrum. Make sure you get a second job that you're really happy with, that's the right fit for you. And it's actually, when you're looking for jobs, it's also a really good time to do things that you wouldn't have been able to do with a job. So it's like a good time to get more sleep and do your meditation, more exercise. So I learned to appreciate that during the job search process. So that's what I would suggest.
I would just add, if as another hiring manager, there are things that happen as to why job offers get lost in normal circumstances. And obviously there's a lot of specific things going on right now. But one thing to do is to, continue to communicate with the recruiter, to have a really positive attitude, let them know that you understand, but stay in touch with them. Circumstances change all the time. And if you were a candidate who made it to job offer, it's very likely that, obviously the company was interested in you. Or if you made it, far down the process and then they had to stop process because of budget concerns or something, keep in touch with that recruiter periodically, check back in, let them know you're still interested and available. And there very well might be an opening in the future that you'll be considered for.
Does anyone want to chime in, or?
I would also just add that, there's in addition to what was said, there's a bit of a strategy piece here that also, if you feel like the company is coming around some difficult challenges, some difficult times, you can also be proactive yourself in terms of, starting to talk to recruiters, talk to other companies, if, get your feelers out there early, because, just what happens is if there are layoffs in your company, you'll end up competing with essentially other people for jobs. So sometimes being proactive and kind of getting out there early means that you get the job before others potentially. So, just always keep in mind that, keep those lines of communication open, and, and there's nothing wrong with having a discussion essentially, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just to supplement that, I did start looking for another job towards the end of my second job because I was feeling the budget constraint at the startup. So I guess even before we got to the point of where they had to cut the staff, I've done the networking and gotten my next job. And to some extent, you might be helping the rest of the company as well. If you found a good opportunity you're going to, then essentially that frees up the budget for the company to retain the rest of their staff.
Okay, thank you so much for your inputs. The next question is for specifically Georgios and Hinwa. Considering that 70% of the postdoc community at MIT is international, both of you mentioned that you were internationals as well and required visa sponsoring for your jobs during the last economic crisis. We would like to know what was the process like and how difficult or easy was it?
I can start. I'm very, very lucky that I had a very easy process. Whenever I remember when I described it to other people, it was always surprising how easy it was. After graduating, my first startup helped me. Of course, you have to get your H-1B. And then I remember at some point, maybe 2-3 years in, I felt like, okay, I'd really like to ask them to help for a green card, but I was being kind of shy. I talked to a few people. They're like, just ask. There's no harm. They can always just say no. They're not gonna fire you because you asked for a green card. And so I did. And the good thing, I'm gonna highlight all the positive things about startups. So I hope they're all like this. But at least where I was, they hired an attorney basically just for me. So they were focused on my application, and it was a small startup, 50 some people. And within 9 months, I had my green card, which I've heard is a record speed. So since then, yeah, I was all set.
For me, it was a very challenging experience. I came to the US on a Fulbright scholarship, so that gave me a J1 visa with a 2-year home residency requirement. So when I was considering whether to join Kayak, I got the commitment from the founders that should I need to go back for 2 years, they would let me camp it out at Cyprus and fall back to an individual contributor position. I was joining as chief scientist at the time, but relinquish management responsibilities, fall back to an individual contributor role if needed, and then come back. Now, luckily, I was able to waive that requirement and stay in the US and then get a green card very quickly. But having that commitment from the two founders was very important to me. The reason they were so accommodating to me is that I was able to help them solve a machine learning problem they had for a couple of years. It was lucky that it was easy for me to solve it. So I had already provided value to them before even starting to work for the company. So and I had created that relationship with them. So it was extremely important.
So in both your cases, the companies were willing to sponsor, right? So you did not need to go through the H-1B lottery system, anything like that.
No, so I did go from F1 student visa into H-1B, but at the time there was no craziness like now.
So once I had the requirement waived, I had I think the H-1B in a matter of 2 weeks, if I remember correctly. And because I was married to a US citizen for years, then in 3 months I had the green card.
Okay, a follow-up question to that. Due to the proclamation of the June 24, what kind of effect do you see will it have on industries hiring international talent? And what policies or strategies are your companies applying to hire international talent?
Let me take this. So I think it's important for international students to focus on companies that have international locations. These proclamations won't last forever. Some international graduates that we hire at the Kayak, if they are unlucky with their H-1B lottery, we send them to an international location and then bring them back with an L1 a year later, which also puts them into an accelerated path for a green card. So most companies, even startups, can be accommodating. What matters is for you to be providing value to the business, and then they will help you. I don't think these restrictions will last forever.
I'll add just a little. I agree that these shouldn't last forever. We have a similar, so I'm right now at a smaller startup, and we have maybe one case. The employee in question is still a student, so we're not really in a huge rush to do, so we're basically waiting it out. We don't have the situation that Yorgos, or the framework that Yorgos described, where we're not international, so we wouldn't be able to do what he described, but certainly other companies would. I would, recommend the obvious: keep your status legal. Don't go rogue or try something too fancy. That's it.
Yeah, I would add.
Go ahead.
I was just going to add yes to keeping your status legal. As someone who's, at a very large multinational tech company, we do everything we can to accommodate and support our employees regardless of their citizenship. And it is nice to have international locations that we can have people relocate to. But one of the most important things as you're applying is to just be upfront and honest about your status with the recruiters. And then that way we know what options we have available to you. We have a ton of internal resources. We care very deeply about everyone who works at Facebook and helping them get through this. And we care very deeply about all of our applicants too. And so we're willing to, do everything we can, and we have a great immigration and legal team behind behind us. But if you just let us know kind of, yeah, please don't go rogue. That's where things actually get into trouble. If you're working from a different location than you say you are, or those kinds of things, that can actually be really problematic. So just be upfront and we'll work with you and figure out the best solution.
Great, thank you all so much. So this question's for all the panelists. Since all of you have graduated from MIT, how much did being associated with MIT or the MIT brand help you in securing your jobs?
Yeah, I would say definitely early in career, your school association does matter quite a bit. For example, when we're hiring new hires, we certainly look at their coursework, their school, and their GPA. For better or worse, over time, as you accumulate more experience, what matters more becomes your work experience, especially your most recent experience. So that starts trumping your educational background. But that being said, I do believe strongly that the connection you've built with MIT and the alumni over time, and kind of, I guess, the skill set you got as an MIT student will stay with you for your career.
Yeah, I'll second that. I think, you know, unlike there are some schools where it's a nice brand to have, but there isn't always substance behind it. The great thing about MIT is that you have both. We're a tremendous brand, but you also earned that brand because you are very bright and worked really hard to get your degree and to do your postdoc. So I think that's why the MIT brand is so great, is that it's a signal of the, you know, capabilities that lie in you. But again, kind of echoing what we said earlier, really use that to your advantage in terms of networking early on. When you're reaching out to people, I think you'll find that you do get a higher hit rate based off of your MIT background. But as Helen was saying, it really starts to become more about your skills and your experience and what you can bring to the table. So it'll get your foot in the door, but then you have to, you know, prove why you'll be valuable to a company.
Yeah, I think it actually matters forever. Surely the experience adds on, and then over time that experience becomes more valuable. But the MIT brand is a signal of intellectual horsepower and also grit, and employers like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably second what Giorgio said. I think it's, I mean, you know, coming from MIT is, you know, is a unique thing. And I would say that it's hard to tell sometimes whether it matters or not, right? And sometimes when folks don't even say it, it's almost like a subconscious thing when they see your resume that, oh yeah, this person, you know, graduated from MIT, right? And they may not give you that feedback, you know, but, you know, overall, I would say that the MIT brand is associated with excellence and hard work, you know, and dedication. And if, you know, if you made it through, I think that it is a very valuable thing.
Yeah, actually, now I think about it, I did recently hire someone who went to MIT, I think 20 or 30 years ago. So it really should have been his work experience that matters most, which it did. But I do remember when I saw the MIT, and I was like, oh, this can't be a dumb person. So, you know, that definitely made a big difference up front. Then, you know, I focus on experience, but I know up front, you know, this person has capability. So I think even 20 or 30 years out, I think that still did matter, you know, for that person's resume.
I'll just quickly add, of course, I second everything people said. For me specifically, it helped directly because my first job was specifically because of my advisor at MIT. So that direct connection was pretty valuable.
Great, those were valuable inputs. So the next question is also for all the panelists. How different is the current economic crisis to the one from 2008, 2009? And what is the current state of employment in your companies? And what advice can you provide?
I can start. So I guess for me, I'll just say I'm much more aware of this one than the previous one. it seems like the job loss was much faster this time around, much more sudden, and it impacted, I know Yorgos mentioned travel industry, that is true, but it's also like with the 2008, it started with the financial market and financial businesses, and then it trickled to the others, whereas this one almost impacted everyone almost uniformly from the beginning. In terms of what's happening at my company, unfortunately, we do have a hiring freeze, but we're very much hoping to be hiring in the new year, at end of this year, beginning of next year. And in terms of advice, I'll just say that our startup is not hiring, but other startups are. And the reason I mentioned that is because as a startup, we tend to, at least in the Boston area, we've tended to struggle hiring before because of the large competition we have with the big corporations in the area, like Microsoft and Amazon. And so they lure all the good candidates, which is good for them, but then we have to fight for them. So now it's easier because there's less competition. So if you are interested, or you know, maybe even if you're not, just check out, there's a lot of resources online about pretty cool startups in the Boston area. Check them out and see if there's anything interesting, and check your network, see if you have a connection, even if it's a second or a third link to them. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, and I would probably also add to that you know, at least in my experience, when I went from academia to industry, because of the circumstance, it sort of forced me to change the direction of my life, you know, in a way. And it could be a profound thing, you know, for you that, you know, maybe if this economic crisis didn't happen, you'd be on a certain career path. Like if you're a software engineer, now I'm a software engineer, but, you know, because of this, the challenges, you may start thinking creatively of other things you might want to do. So maybe it's taking a risk and doing a startup, or maybe it's thinking about different, you know, different kinds of applications of your skills. So I would encourage you to think more broadly, you know, and network in those areas, you know, kind of find out about them, do informational interviews, you know, connect with your friends that might be doing cool things, you know, talk to them, hey, is there, you know, something in there for me that I could experience and help out with? So, you know, use it to your advantage and, you know, explore life a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely had ending up in a different industry than intended because of recession experience, because my background was in biotechnology. So that's what I thought I was going to do for my entire career. But because of the recession and just generally, at least in the LA area, the biotech startups were not doing well. So I eventually ended up in the aerospace and defense industry at a large company, which I didn't think was going to be a long-term fit for me. But so far I've been there for 10 years and I do enjoy the job a lot. I mean, it's technically challenging, and it makes use of my technical skill. So yeah, I mean, I would say I'm kind of a classic example of ending up somewhere I didn't intend to, but it's working out well for me.
Yeah, one of the positives about what's going on right now, at least in tech, is that things have become much less geographically constrained. So there's a lot of remote work that's happening. At Facebook, we are working remotely through the end of, or through July 31st next year at minimum, which has allowed me as a hiring manager to consider candidates regardless of where they live, which is awesome. It's awesome for the candidates, it's awesome for us because we're getting the best talent and you don't have to move somewhere that you don't want to move. And we have not stopped hiring at all. We're obviously in a very lucky position. We are continuing, we have new products that we've introduced in response to to COVID and to the economic hit to businesses. I particularly work on some of the SMB products that we've introduced since then. And so we've not only continued to address our hiring goals, but for 2020, but we've actually added additional roles. So at some of the larger tech companies, it's full steam ahead. I would encourage you to look at the open job listings for Facebook and Google and others, and go for it.
Yeah, at Kayak, we obviously largely stopped hiring, but we have an ongoing policy. When you run into a unique talent, you create a position for them. And we've done that in the past, even in the previous crisis. I was one of the lucky ones that they created a position for. And even now, if we run into a superb UX designer or a superb data scientist, we will create a position for them. So that's very convenient for strong school brands like MIT, particularly MIT.
Great, thank you everyone. So for those PhDs and postdocs who have still some time before graduation, what skill sets do you think candidates should develop that would help them in their pursuit of jobs during this recession?
The most important thing that we really look for and that we see especially for PhDs and postdocs is being able to talk about applied work. So to move past the theoretical work that may have been the subject of your dissertation or of your postdoc, and really being able, in whatever field you're looking for a role in, to think about how you could apply that work to real world business problems. And be able to think about like translating it into business recommendations. That's kind of the biggest gap that we see, of being able to kind of think about, yeah, like whatever your subject matter expertise is in terms of actually business issues and solutions.
Yeah, I would say even if you're not looking for a job now, you can start looking at the job postings of companies you think you will be interested in. They will list, basic qualifications and preferred qualifications, and you might start seeing a theme of skill sets they want in the position you're applying for. It could be something specific like, specific languages they want you to know, or it could be more of the soft skills. So I would say definitely, if you have time, start looking at the job postings now and start thinking about how you would develop the qualifications that's listed on the postings.
I'll add specifically, if you're interested in sort of a machine learning, applied machine learning, make sure you work on your coding skills, at least from my own personal experience, like myself, how I moved from academia. So MATLAB and R are great at MIT. Try to grow some skills that are like, I don't know, Python or Scala, Java, things like that, languages that are used in production. And I'll give an example. I was interviewing at a company, and I don't know why the whole engineering team was interviewing me at the same time. And I said, I code in Perl, and the whole room went, it was a whole shock in the room. So I went back home and worked on learning other languages since then. But that's one advice. And the second one is practice interviews. If there are certain companies you're not sure of, maybe use them as a practice. It's, always good to just get the anxiety out of your system if that's something you're worried about. That's it.
I would probably just add to that, in regards to like just the practice that I keep, I always keep a Google Drive of some examples of my work. So it could be slide decks, it just could be, non-confidential, but, presentations that I've given that I can share. So if it ever comes to a time where I need to transition, it's like as easy as just like, hey, here's a link to some previous work I've done. And I can run the gamut from engineering to neuroscience to drug discovery, but then folks can really see like specifically how you applied your work and things that you've done. So I think that's one thing that's, good to spend time on. It's almost like your own portfolio in a way. A GitHub repository is always good if you're working on source, make sure, you're uploading it. It's like good coding practice. Like, you can show people, hey, here's 1,000 lines of my code, what I've done, and here's an example of it. It's really easy just to share a link. The other thing I would say is a really good skill to have is trying to figure out how to write a good cover letter and craft a resume, because a lot of times it's, a database search, or it's a search through essentially your application to see if you're a good fit, right? So, I think that's also a very important skill, trying to figure out what the job is asking for and try to tailor your application to that job. And it can make a difference.
Yeah, I would say definitely make sure your resume is tailored or at least not in conflict with the position you're applying, because occasionally I might get a resume where the upfront statement says, they're enthusiastic about being a mechanical engineer, but the job is like a computer scientist. So then, they didn't really spend the time of tailoring the resume. So that part is definitely important.
Georgios, do you want to add something, or Sarah?
Yeah, I'll second the Git repository, and yeah, you need to, if you want to do machine learning in the industry, you should know Java or Python.
Okay, great. Next question, what advice do you have for candidates who are negotiating offers during the current pandemic? So if someone has already job offers and negotiating these job offers, what kind of advice would you like to give?
I'll go first here because it was very important for me. I got lucky in 2008 when I was negotiating. I traded off cash for stock, and this is a good time, especially if you're joining a private company, a startup, because valuations are going to be depressed now. So it's probably the best time to trade off the future earnings for short-term earnings. Also, it's a signal that you are in it for the long run for the company that's looking to hire you.
+1 to that. Also, my first thing is everyone please negotiate your job offer. Please do not think that it will appear that you're ungrateful for the offer. We 100% expect candidates to negotiate, and I'm going to make a special ask of women. Please, you especially negotiate. There's a ton of research that shows that women negotiate at way lower rates than men do. And it only hurts you in the long run, because what you start at is then what everything is based off of later on, including your future jobs a lot of the time. So think about it as an investment in your own future. And also remember that it's just asking. Like, the worst thing that people can say is no. I think I've heard very, very rarely of ever offers being rescinded, as long as you do it politely, as long as you negotiate in a respectful manner. It's something that's just expected. So please do negotiate. I think you should be aware, though, and you can even ask your recruiter, who should really be a partner to you in negotiating, ask them about what are the kinds of trade-offs that might be made. So it might be you're willing to accept stock in lieu of salary. That's often a really good thing to do in a recession. It's easier to give out equity than it is to have cash on hand. You could also negotiate things like vacation time or bonusing structure. So think about what things might be available to negotiate, but please do it.
Yeah, I definitely second that. And I guess the other thing to watch out for is sometimes some company, I guess, to get you in would offer you a very big raise up front relative to your current position, but there's a clause for freezing in your raises for several years. So I guess just make sure in the negotiating process, you're clear about the terms of what you're getting. They might give you something that look very attractive now, but there's strings attached to it.
And I would also mention that, there's typically like two distinct entities when you're getting a job. There's HR, and then there's like your hiring manager, and the team around the hiring manager that makes the decision, right, or provides feedback, right? And really the negotiations are with HR, right? It's not really with the hiring manager. So that's in general, that's one thing to try to understand in the process. So you can always use the hiring manager as an advocate in a way, right? If something seems really off, like, hey, I went on Glassdoor and the average salary is this for this title and I'm getting offered this. Why? Can you help me understand why this is the case? So, have that discussion, and, if the hiring manager is giving feedback like, yeah, that does seem kind of odd, you can kind of use that data with HR and say like, look, this data is here. can you help me kind of close that gap, right? So definitely talk to the hiring manager. There are things that HR will say like, we want you to start right away, like tomorrow, it may not always be the case with the hiring manager. Maybe the hiring manager is more flexible. Maybe they don't really need you for 2 months or a month, right? And so that may give you time to like transition and do some life things. So I guess in short, make sure you're continuing the discussion with the hiring manager in terms of expectation.
Sarah, what you said was amazing in terms of women negotiating. Yes, please do that. And Yorgos, you stole all my lines. So, no, but I'll just add that, yes, negotiate stock options. I always do that. There's no harm. And you might want to ask for how many outstanding shares. So if they tell you get 10,000 stock options, but out of 1 million is different than out of, I don't know, 1 billion. So just to get a sense of, okay, how much of this company are you going to get in the end? And again, it is a sign that you're thinking of the future and you're committed to this company and you believe in its future, which is why you're asking for something later on, not right now. That's it.
I will add to the women negotiating. Probably only MBA graduate women negotiate aggressively, but you will see that across the board, they under-negotiate their initial salary and stock grants, and that harms you in the long run. So make sure you do negotiate, especially if you're coming from MIT, you have to negotiate.
And I'm actually going to give you, I just realized I was thinking back to what I knew and didn't know when I finished grad school. So I'm going to give you some very tactical advice, which is negotiate base salary first if you can, because your bonus is calculated off your base and future increases will be calculated off your base. A 10% negotiation is always a totally fair place to start. A lot of companies actually build in an expectation of adding in 10% to salary for a negotiation. So if you don't know what to counter with a 10% increase. And take a signing bonus as your very last option after you've negotiated everything else. A signing bonus is one time and it'll get taxed at a different rate, a very high rate. Versus everything else will hopefully carry through, whether it's your base salary or your equity, you'll have long-term benefits to that. A signing bonus is kind of just a one-time thing. So that's the very last option to me for negotiation.
And obviously your negotiating position gets stronger if you have multiple offers at the same time. So if you're lucky enough to get yourself into that position, then yes, you have a very strong position for asking for more.
Great advices. Thank you so much. We will open the session for Q&A from the audience. Hopefully Yasmina can ask the questions that have been posted by the audience.
Awesome, thank you, Ashwin. We have received many questions and some of them already our great panelists have answered. But here are some that we're gonna answer now live. And the first one is a postdoc who is kind of between academia and industry, whether the question was whether working in industry can open a chance to work in academia in the future, or once you decide for industry, there is no way back to academia. For example, David, I think you were on a path to academia. Have you ever considered going back to academia from industry?
No, but I probably won't do that ever again. But I know that I have colleagues in R&D that have gone back actually to become faculty track, and it's definitely possible. It's maintaining the network, keep going to conferences, keep publishing. If you ever want to go back into academia, the publications are key. You got to keep publishing no matter where you are. But it's definitely possible. It's really keeping the network alive and keeping the published work alive.
Thank you so much. And then the second question was whether it's preferable to have a green card before applying for the industry, especially in these times.
I think it doesn't matter. You want to work for companies where it doesn't matter.
Awesome. The second question was for those of you who are more in the AI and machine learning experience, and this postdoc is a international with a PhD in computer science and now a postdoc at MIT, and has been trying to find industrial jobs in artificial intelligence, but have not been consider himself a machine learning researcher. So the question is, what do you think is the best strategy for computer science PhDs like me to apply the research positions these days? And so he mentioned some research topics: federated learning of distributed system for ambient intelligence.
If I can answer this, I think any PhD from MIT or postdoc from MIT is a superb data scientist, whatever the department. So it doesn't, I would focus more on the relationships that would get you into a specific company, and not splitting hairs on what your specific research may have been or on department.
Yeah, looking at what was described in their question, you can totally you can totally sell this as a machine learning. When I read it, I was a bit surprised. They can sell themselves as a machine learning or data scientist or analytics person.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I was going to add the comment about like my publications aren't in top tier. Like, trust me, there are many machine learning specialists in Silicon Valley who do not have publications in top tier journals either. So I think one of the things that, you know, at MIT, we have a very high internal bar for work. And you will find that your work is very well appreciated in the business world outside. So don't let that hold you back, please.
Yes, so we have another similar question where a person is currently a postdoc, a new postdoc, but if they feel like they haven't accomplished much yet, and what would be the strategy to apply for industry?
Less humility.
Less humility. That's a great advice. So just go for it, right?
Yeah, I think, you know, whether you've accomplished the postdoc or not, yeah, it's, I think it's setting the right expectation in just like the previous question around like, you know, what's the perception of yourself? And I think that's a really big thing, how you perceive yourself and how others perceive you, right? And it's something that can really hold you back in a way, right? So, you know, be open to the idea that, you know, even though you may not fit the class of machine learning or whatever you think it is that you specifically belong to, if you're out for a job, other people might think of you a certain way, and they might actually consider you for that type of job. So just be open to yourself in terms of, you know, how you project yourself, right? And I think that's the first thing. And, you know, if you haven't published a paper in your postdoc, you know, there should be other accolades that you can cite when you're finding a job. So, you know, I think just start there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I did see a question adding on to that, but also I saw a question to me about transitioning between industry. I think sometimes one thing you try to demonstrate is ability to learn. That's something, you know, we look for a lot in hiring managers too, is, you know, does your background, your list of experience, and the way you speak to about yourself show that you're someone who can easily learn something new? Because I think that's important and needed across many industries, because there isn't a single place where you'd be doing exactly the same thing for 40 years. So someone who can learn quickly, sometimes to us, is more valuable than someone who has, you know, many years of a very particular skill. So I would say definitely if you have solid examples in the past of where you were challenged with something new that you have to do and you were able to kind of excel in that, I think that's a very important skill that any employer would appreciate.
Thank you. Then we have the next question. What would you, many of you are in a startup, so what are the pros and cons working for a startup? And a very maybe sensitive question, how much do you usually pay a postdoc hired in a startup position?
So in terms of pros and cons, the pros are you end up, you wear many hats in a startup. You have to learn different skills, and you end up also writing, which is pretty cool. You're writing a code or a product that will immediately impact the user. So your work, you see its impact pretty fast. And then you can grow also pretty fast in a startup. You can start as a data scientist and over time become, I don't know, lead, especially if you start at a pretty small startup to begin with. And at least on the East Coast, I'll just add that at least I've heard from a couple of people who came from the West Coast and interviewed with us that they were surprised that our we still sort of respect family time. We're not, it's not as hectic as on the West Coast. And we're not, you know, working at crazy hours. You know, there's this reputation for startups that, you know, you have no life but the startup. So we respect, you know, life outside of work. So there's that. And then in terms of cons, maybe, if it matters to you, the salary is probably going to be lower than at some of the bigger companies. But I should add that, you know, at least data scientists, machine learning, we get, in general, we get paid. It's a decent pay across, you know, different companies. You're not going to starve. You'll be able to buy a house. You'll have a family. You'll live a good life. So it's not going to be, you know, it's not going to stop you from doing things you want to do. So that's one con. And maybe sometimes every once in a while, I miss going to publishing and going to conferences. If that's like, oh, I really wish I could do that. That's one of the cons. I don't really want to share pay, but as I said, it'll be less than what you would get if you worked at a bigger company. I think that's it.
Yeah, so I have worked both startup jobs and huge multicultural, multinational company jobs, so I can speak to both. I would say definitely at a startup, you get to wear a lot more hats, and so you get to do, I guess you get to do what you see is interesting at a company that needs to be done. There's very little that would stop you from taking on a new responsibility. So that part is definitely very interesting. And and a lot less bureaucracy as startups. So like at a big company, if you say want to buy something, you may have to get a form signed by 3 different people. And so processes are big at large companies. And sometimes that can be a little frustrating for, you know, engineers who want to get things done. So definitely, I think I really appreciated the fact that, you know, I had many different hats and that things were a lot more agile, a lot less bureaucratic at a startup. On the other hand, I think the pro of working at a big company is kind of the, you know, the stability, a very, you know, robust benefits package type of thing. So if that's what you value in a job, then you would find that at a big company.
Just on the, I've also worked at a couple of startups too. Just on the salary question, I would advise you to check out 3 different resources. One is Glassdoor, which may or may not have information, obviously, for smaller startups. AngelList is a good place to find startup salary information, and then Levels is another one. But you might find more information on AngelList than on Glassdoor for competitive startup salary information.
So we have another question. We mentioned before how to connect with recruiters on LinkedIn, but are there any other venues? Maybe some companies are doing some virtual open door or virtual job fairs. I don't know. What would you recommend for the postdocs to look into?
Yeah, I would say career fairs or conferences is a very good place. Obviously, nobody's having in-person conferences now, but I think there are still virtual conferences where they have, you know, the virtual career fair. So that's kind of a good place to connect with recruiters or companies if you don't know, where else to get the foot in the door.
Yeah, I was also going to mention that there's almost like it's almost like cheating in a way. There's a way to do this very quickly. So on LinkedIn, if you look at one person's profile, like a recruiter, on the side it says people that viewed this person also viewed this person. And so like if you go to one recruiter's site, you'll also see the names of like 20 other recruiters. And so you can just very quickly go through and just, do it in the afternoon. So you can try that.
Yeah, +1 to the conferences. A lot of the big conferences like Grace Hopper, I've actively recruited at for the last 5 years. We will continue in the virtual environment to do so this year. Also use the MIT Career Office. Sometimes they actually know who the recruiters are. Like there are university recruiters at large companies who specifically are assigned to individual universities, and the Career Office might know who the direct contacts are for like Facebook for MIT. And so they can even put you in touch with recruiters that way too, in addition to LinkedIn, or looking through career websites. Sometimes we'll have aliases that you can use too for like research. We have a specific alias for hiring.
Thank you. And we have the last question. Our last question from the Q&A is, if you're interested in one company, are there any limits to how many positions you can apply?
Yeah, I would advise that you should apply to the position you care about. And during the interview process, they will redirect you to other positions that may be a good fit. If you apply to everything, it shows lack of focus and lack of serious interest in that particular, in one or in that particular company.
Yeah, no, I definitely second that. I think if a person applied to like 10 different positions, the recruiter will tell us. They will say this person also applied to 9 different positions here, and that kind of becomes a red flag to you that this person isn't particularly serious about your position. I mean, I think it's okay if you apply to say 2 or 3 that are highly related jobs. So that shows that you kind of did the research of all the positions and focus down on these. So that's fine. But yes, like what Giorgio said, if you apply to the position that's not the best for you, usually the recruiter or the hiring manager will redirect you to the right position.
Yeah, I would also mention that there's a lot of companies there's incentives for referrals. So if you have a company in mind but you have a friend or someone in your network inside the company, submitting your application through them is great because it's a network connection. But then when it's input into the system through someone internally, it's actually flagged with a higher priority sometimes. So again, make sure you use your network, especially if they're in the company, because when you get hired, that person will sometimes get like a financial benefit as well. So it benefits everybody and it gives you more visibility.
Awesome, thank you. So we're going back to Maha because we're at the end of our sessions.
Thank you so much, Yasmina. And thank you all of the attendees for all of those questions. So with just the last minute, I'd like to welcome any final comments that our panelists might have before wrapping up.
I'm definitely welcome to people reaching out to me. I don't know if you plan to share panelist contact later.
We could do that, yeah, if you're open to it.
Sure. I will caveat though that the industry I'm working in, the defense industry, a lot of the job requires clearance. So for the most part, we need citizens to apply. So that's just caveated. But if you're interested in aerospace and defense, it's one of the industries that's actually not being impacted a lot by the recession now.
I'm just going to give you a little bit of a pep talk, given some of the nature of the questions that we received. I know how challenging, we all know how challenging the environment at MIT is. And I think while you finish your degree and you're postdocing, I think when you emerge victorious on the other side, you will realize how valuable you are to companies and to business. And so please don't let any concerns you have about your performance, or if you have enough publications or any of those things, hold you back from applying to jobs that you're interested in. Please know that people do really recognize the value of an MIT degree and are interested in talking to you. And so I just want you to feel good about yourself and put yourself out there for opportunities in front of you. And you can also, you're welcome to connect to me on LinkedIn too.
Yeah, I would definitely just second what Sarah said. As a scientist and engineer, one of the most valuable things for me is data. So gathering data about yourself is so critical. And the way that you do that is, get out there, talk to people, try to get an impression of what people think about you, right? And what companies think about you. And with that data, you're going to build confidence of like what you can do and who you are. And that's ultimately going to help you in lots of different ways.
Yeah, I guess I'll add, don't be, we mentioned it before, don't be too hard on yourself. Take it easy, be patient, take your time if you can. I know there's a lot of international people anxious to fix their status in the US. But yeah, try to not take everything, rejections and other things personally. That's it.
And I will add, don't underestimate the value of the friendships you make at MIT. I have hired 3 people from my lab. The person who was sitting on my left now runs data science at Kayak. So these are long-term relationships, and they will, you should maintain them.
Great. Well, thank you again to all the panelists. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your thoughts and experiences with us today. All of your advice was extremely helpful as folks are joining the job search during this recent economic recession. For all the audience members, thank you for joining in and all of your great questions that hopefully we got to a lot of them during this panel. So we'll also be sending a follow-up email to all attendees with a link to this video recording that will be posted on the MIT Postdoc Association YouTube channel. So with that, I'd just like to thank everyone again and hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.